Okay, time for another project on the 77 Kingsley here. And today it's going to be the steering shaft boot. So if we kind of scoot down here, we can see that the boot is pretty well torn, and I guess the good news is it looks like there's still some grease there. It doesn't look completely dried out and rusty or anything, but definitely needs a new boot. And so I'll be working on this. Sounds like the way to do this is to take the shaft out and replace the boot, of course re-grease it, reinstall it. And an important part here is to make sure that the steering wheel and front tires are straight and that you have the steering box centered, and that everything then gets reassembled the right way. And so my thought is I'm going to mark where it is. I've already made sure that the steering wheel is straight and the tires are straight and the shaft is lined up with the steering box. So we'll see if we can get down in here and get a view on that. Definitely not a easy thing to see, but there's a flat part kind of in the center of the frame there on the steering box, which is supposed to be aligned with the bolt at the bottom of the shaft. And if those are aligned, then apparently the steering box is in that center position, which helps with stability going down the highway. So looks like everything is centered, and so my job really is to just take the shaft out, repair the boot, re-grease it, reinstall it, everything still being straight. So that is the project. So I took apart the shaft, and when I took it apart, the slip yoke slipped out very easily, and I found that the lower part of the shaft and the U-joint was tight and looked good, and so I decided not to take the whole thing apart. So I took apart the top part of this. I cut off the old boot. I cleaned out the joint really well. I did not disassemble everything, but I did clean out all of the old grease, repacked it with new Moly CV joint grease, and put the universal boot on. And CV boots usually have wire clamps, but this is not spinning or anything, and so I used just some plastic ties to clamp this down. There's also a dust cover that I've seen some have over this slip yoke, and I would need to take apart the CV joint in order to slide that on. I don't see any way to slide it over this part of the shaft. It didn't have it before. I think as long as I keep this well greased, and so the grease pushes any dirt out, then I shouldn't have any problems with this seizing up, which is something that I saw in some of the material that I read. So repack this with grease, put the new boot on, and so now I just need to reassemble this. I did find, as I was working on it, I didn't secure the steering wheel initially, and any little movement in the bottom of the shaft here causes the steering wheel to move. And so I knew the steering wheel was centered when I started, and so I used a rod, bungeed that to the steering wheel to hold the steering wheel secure at that straight position, so that when I put this back together, I'll be able to get it pretty much where it was when I started. But lesson learned, I should have secured the steering wheel at the beginning of the project, and that would have caused me a little less pain along the way. All right, so now I'm going to work on reinstalling this. So there's only 4 ways that this slip yoke fits together, and it's pretty obvious which way is going to line up with the shaft here. And so I just need to get this positioned and then work this on, and it needs to just be lined up perfectly. I did test fit it a little bit ago, and it slid on very easily. So now with the slip yoke, it's just going to take a little bit of work to get this lined up and get it to slide on. Okay, so I got it installed and took a bit of work to get the flange slipped on here. Ended up having to loosen up this clamp a little bit. I think it was making a little pressure on the shaft side of things, but once I got it lined up, it slid on pretty easily. I had put a little bit of grease on it to help it slide on, but everything lined up well, and I think we're in pretty good shape. I greased the slip shaft down there, also greased the U-joint, and torqued this down to 40 foot-pounds is the spec that I found for that. And so I think we're in better shape, much better than the torn open boot that I had before. And so hopefully this lasts a good long time.